Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Courageous Curiosity Podcast. I'm Superintendent Ben Mainka, and I'm super excited about, yet again, amazing people that we get to talk to about issues surrounding schools and life and just society in general. And so today, one of the questions that, the curious question, if you will, that's been kind of on my mind is what in the world are we doing as schools hiring all these medical professionals? We have schools now that are hiring district nurses and different positions. And I think a lot of people think that schools' primary function, of course, is to teach kids to read and write, which is absolutely one of our things that we focus on. But there's so much more that schools have really been charged to do, and out of necessity. And I think certainly through the pandemic, we've seen an increase in some of these other services that we've needed. And so, sometimes when we have these podcasts, we have multiple guests on the show. There's so much to cover today, and so we're excited to be with Kathy Ferris, who is our Supervisor of Medical Services here in the Novi Community School District. And Kathy, it's awesome to have you with us. Talk a little bit about your background, how you got into this role, and just anything about you that you want to let the audience know about.
All right. Well, thank you for having me today.
Yeah.
I've been in the district for 13 school years now. My background is actually pediatric ICU, and I still do that, touch and that a little bit at Mott at Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor. But I love my district position here, now Supervisor of Medical Services. Mm-hmm. I feel like I bring a lot to the table with our medical students and our parents. We got through the pandemic very well because we had some good guidance, I feel. Mm-hmm. It made me get closer to the staff, the students, the administrators, get some really good relationships built. And I'm just really proud to see what we have created in this district medically.
Yeah, I obviously have gotten to know you since starting here, and you've been here for a while, and it's been really neat to see. Also, not only as an employee, you're also a parent, and a community member, and all of those things. But I hear regularly, because schools all over the country struggled with COVID. But I know that Novi did a really, really great job. So if you could maybe just highlight for people that would be listening or watching this show, what do you think was the secret sauce, or what was the success for Novi doing so well through the pandemic? Obviously, you were here through the thick of it.
Correct.
I know that my predecessor, Dr. Matthews, was leaning on you very heavily for your guidance and your expertise. But what was it that Novi did so well from a medical lens that helped the district really get through that really difficult time?
Well, in the beginning, when we first heard of COVID, right, we hear of this thing, and I had no idea where it was going to go, right? Mm-hmm. I felt like, it's just another flu. Here we go, and then it got more and more and more, and there was different layers and layers, and then there was the quarantine piece and the isolation piece, and then do we keep kids in school? Do we not keep them in school? And then we started just learning, right? Learning with Oakland County Health, learning with physicians that I'd work with at the hospital. What is safe? What is not safe? We were able to keep kids in school because we did the measuring of the desk, and we did the quarantine piece, and we did the isolation piece, but we felt it was really important for them to stay within our four walls. It was a safe space. We know that people don't feel safe in their own spaces sometimes, and school is a safety net. And so we felt it was really, really important to keep them in school safe, and we did it. It was hard, but we did it. There were many late nights. We were measuring desks. Dr. Matthews and I would call each other several times a day just to know what was safe. And same with our staff. When do we come to school? When do we stay home? When do we wear a mask? When we don't wear a mask? What do we do about vaccinations? What do we do about all these things? And it was just that guidance that I could provide.
Yeah, and that's really an interesting thing. I mean, I think it was such a controversial time, right? Mask, no mask. Absolutely. Are we coming to school, not coming to school? And everybody had an opinion, and they were passionate because they wanted what they believed to be best for their children,
Correct.
Right? And I think one of the things that I've appreciated about you is you don't take an extreme position, I don't think, in any direction, right? It's kind of like you're really trying to balance the needs of parents and students and the staff and the community members. And so, I'm sure you've been put into some difficult positions
of course, right.
with that. And
of course.
But don't you think it's really essential to be able to take kind of a balanced perspective? I mean, obviously, there's some hardline things that we have to do, but to consider in a community like a public school, there's so many different perspectives, and how you balance that.
Absolutely. I think it's, you have to build relationships with parents, and they have to be able to trust you. And, just being able to have the communication with parents, with students, with administrators, and build those relationships has been really huge. And, just kind of balance it all, and you got to have an open mind.
Yeah.
And it's not always black and white. You got to see, I'm here for all the kids. And parents don't sometimes understand that, or staff doesn't understand that. They're looking at one kid and one thing that's going on. And I have to get all the kids in the building and keep them all safe.
Sure.
And so I have to look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of transitioning a little bit into your role, a lot of districts have said, well, we're gonna hire a school nurse, and maybe they have a part-time, or maybe they contract with a hospital. This district, we have multiple nurses, but your position is actually to supervise the nurses and to also manage a myriad of different medical plans and things like that throughout the district. So I think it's a very antiquated stereotype, right? That school nurses are basically
sitting in an office,
putting Band-Aids on scrapes, and that's pretty much all you do, right? And so I know that that's so different, but for the people that would be interested in this podcast, maybe talk a little bit about what medical services you oversee and how that is really critical to the functioning of the district.
Right. So I start off the year by training all of our staff. We have about 900 staff that we train. Simple things like EpiPens and Diastat and AEDs and CPR. And we've taken the notion we're Michigan Heart Safe Schools. We take that very seriously. We do a lot of CPR training with our coaches, which is really important. We're doing emergency response teams in our buildings just to keep everyone safe. I have simple things like diabetics. I follow 17 diabetics in our district on a daily basis. And we do things every day like feedings and tube feedings and diabetics and meds that come in for lunch. I supervise all of that with no, I can't be in every building, and neither can my nurse, the other nurse, but we train the staff on how to take care of those kids. And if we're not available, we're still available by phone. We follow these kids on their Dexcoms, on their phones. I follow 5 a day,
Wow.
and I don't take it home with me, but I do take it home with me, so we do a lot during the day. It's just, a lot of IEPs, a lot of 504s. We're very, very integral parts of that, the medical piece of it. And just working and being available for staff at any time.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of parents, in our generation, they may not necessarily realize just how many more kind of medical diagnoses we're seeing that are coming into our schools at a much higher prevalence, right?
Absolutely.
We're seeing food allergies and diabetes and all of these other types of things, and maybe for somebody that has a child that doesn't have one of those, medical conditions, it's kind of like, well, I'm not sure what the value is. But certainly if your child does have one of those medical conditions, it's essential. And I would hope that, I think most people probably understand that too.
Yeah. And, when I first came to the district, even every building was doing things a little bit different. And that was uncomfortable for parents. Parents would be like, why am I doing one thing at Deerfield? And then when I go to the high school, I have different paperwork. And so when I came, I kind of made that, mainstreamed. We do the same process for all of our buildings. I think parents really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then when you tell them, what we do for the training of the staff, it puts parents at ease. It puts students at ease when they can walk into the buildings and know that they're going to be taken care of. If they don't feel good, they know what to do. Our staff knows what to do, and our teachers, everyone knows what to do in those situations.
Absolutely. I know one of the things that our board has recently been really excited about, and myself as well, we've had a couple brief conversations, just this idea of, a lot of the training that you do, but also training our students potentially in CPR, right?
Correct.
So this is something that we currently do for 9th graders, but we don't necessarily have them all certified and so on and so forth. We really kind of want to really kind of be a leader in that area. Absolutely. So I know that it's great what we're currently doing, but how do you see us pushing into the future, and that is a priority, making sure that we do have our students trained in basic CPR, first aid, maybe even knowing how to operate an AED. I mean, all of those types of things that could save a life, right?
Yep. We, currently with the coaches, we've done that. And so it trickles down, right? When we do it with the coaches, it trickles down to the kids, and the kids want to know. And they do it in their health classes. They don't necessarily have to get certified, but we encourage them to get certified. And we have a really good process for that. We have a couple more people in the district, like Dennis, who's our safety and security. He's going to be CPR trained and going to help us kind of certify more. Teachers have to be certified within their first year of teaching. So there's a lot more people that need to be certified. And then that trickles down because people want to be certified in our district. They find it very important, especially when I teach it every year. They think, oh, I want to be certified. And so people come to me all the time and say, hey, when's your next CPR class?
Yeah.
And I think it's great.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that allows for our students to really have a skill that is really kind of becoming like an essential skill for
it's a good
adults.
life lesson, we call it.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things, and again, I think we could have probably a week-long podcast that could go nonstop 24/7 talking about vaccines and vaccinations. But I do want to get into this a little bit because it does have a really big impact on schools. And one of the things I know we talk a lot about at the beginning of the school year is, we have required mandatory vaccinations for students to attend school here in the state of Michigan. And, there's some parents that, have a very different philosophical belief than getting their kids those vaccines. So maybe talk a little bit about that process, and then also, your role in it and some of the challenges that you find yourself in with navigating that.
So the Michigan requirements require that you have to have certain immunizations to go to school, like we just said. We do our reporting twice a year, if you will, once in the fall and then once in the winter. And so we have to look at everybody's immunization record and see if they're up to date. What parents sometimes misunderstand is that when we're calling them to tell them that they need vaccinations, I'm not promoting the vaccination, definitely. That's a personal opinion. That's a family's opinion about whether they want to do that or not. But then they have to get a waiver. And so we're seeing an increase in waivers, which is concerning to me because, like we've also said, you can eradicate some of the vaccinations, but some of the things are not being eradicated anymore because people are not vaccinating. So it becomes a concern of the greater, good of the kids in a district. If a child, for instance, let me give you an example. If a child gets measles in our district, then I have to look at everybody's immunization record and exclude those students that are not immunized from it. It's not that I have an opinion about it. I'm not kicking you out of school because I don't care. It's because you can't be in school if you're not immunized to keep you safe.
And do you think that most parents that you're telling that have to be excluded, do they feel that you're making an opinion about it, or is that their initial response?
Sometimes. Sometimes it's their initial response, but it's not our initial response. It's really not. It's in the good of the keeping the child safe. And I'm not going to convince you whether or not that's not what, we could have, like you said, a 4-hour podcast about that. But you have to follow the rules. You have to follow the rules of what Michigan says. And if you don't want to get your vaccinations for some reason, then you need to get a waiver signed, and we just need to explain the process.
Yeah, so. And I'm not taking a stance one way or another. But I do think that parents play a vital role in this decision, right? I mean, if you think about, for an individual to determine what they're going to put in their body, whatever the chemicals are that are in the vaccine, whatever the vaccine does, that's really a choice that each individual has to make, right? And so I think it's not really the school's place to get involved with that. But what I think some people may not understand is that there are laws and requirements that the state have, and we have to be in compliance with those laws, right? And so I think it is important to maybe think about how are we helping come alongside parents that are saying, look, I don't care what the state says. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not going to be putting, any kind of vaccine into my child. And so, but yet I want them to participate in the public school process. So how do parents that are in that spot, how do parents that are in that space, feel like the district can communicate with them what to do and all of those types of things?
We've had a lot of those conversations. Danielle and my other nurse and I have we sit with families, we call them and just have them understand the process. That if they do want a waiver, this is the process you have to go through. If you want a medical waiver, sometimes you can get it through your doctor. If you want to get an immunization appointment, this is what you need to do. So we do have a process. Sometimes parents are receptive and sometimes parents are not receptive to those. But we have gone to the extreme of excluding students. It's really never come down to that, knock on wood, that, when we say to them, we're sorry that your kid cannot come to school by November 1st or whatever the date is, they're like, oh, I got to do something about it then, because they want their kids in school, sure. Right? And so it doesn't matter where you live or what you do, that you still want your kids to go to school if that's what you choose to be in a public school. So when you put those guidelines into effect, people do. We're finding that they respond to them if you give them a bottom line.
And I think there's probably a large number of people that when it comes to vaccines and things like that, they have an opinion for sure. But there is a difference when we start talking about vaccines, and particularly some of the ones that are required for school, on vaccines that eradicate disease and vaccines that just sort of prevent like maybe a flu
an exacerbation
or
something like
right.
that. Yeah.
So can you explain from a medical perspective, the difference between those two types of vaccines? Because I think sometimes all vaccines get lumped into the same category. Correct. And they actually are two very different things.
They are two different very much. Mm-hmm. In my practice, I've been an ICU nurse for 27 years, and I've seen deaths from varicella, from Hib B, which is epiglottitis, from polio, from pertussis. And, I have a different perspective. When you've seen deaths from those things in children, you have a different perspective. And those things can be, and were at once eradicated because of vaccination rates. And those vaccination rates are falling. And so just some data that our state nurse consultant shared is those cases of those particular things are much more prevalent these days, measles, mumps, stuff like that. And so, there are certain vaccinations that can be eradicated by using those old school, we call them, vaccinations. Things like COVID and flu, and those are vaccinations, but, you even listen to the radio and say it will prevent you from getting COVID or flu. And sometimes that's hard to hear because it doesn't really prevent you from getting the disease. It just maybe lessens the amount that you get or the severity that you get, but it sometimes doesn't eradicate it. So it's hard to put those in the same class, if you will. Yeah. And so that's sometimes hard to hear that, kind of people, they do. If you don't have the medical background to understand it all, you do kind of put them in the same pot, if you will. Sure. And so it's not sometimes like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really helpful. And I think it's important for people to recognize, look, we're required to have a polio vaccine, right? Correct. And again, that vaccination has been medically proven to prevent and actually to eliminate that. And correct. That's something that we want to do to make sure that those things don't crop up. And that is different than, say, a COVID or a flu or some other type of suppressant vaccine. So shifting on, obviously, I said, we could talk about vaccines forever, correct, and there's lots of stuff that, people could take from that. But what do you see are the real issues that are coming down the track? Like, what do you see your job as a supervisor of medical services, as a nurse? What do you think schools, what do you see coming down the tracks, if you will? Like, how do you think your job's going to look in the next 3 to 5 years?
Kind of scares me a little bit, actually, just because of where it's gone in 13 years. I of course, you always worry about another pandemic. I don't ever want that to happen again. But
we do not.
No, we do not, right? But, just every year there's more special ed population. We get more. We're kind of, a lot of people have said I've moved to Novi because we have good medical staff. And that's really reassuring, So I feel like it's just more and more, unfortunately. When I first started, we had about 300 medical plans. I'm up to about 1,700 things that I look in Power School every year.
Wow.
And that's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's just, it might not be a formal medical plan that's written, but it's a medical issue that I still need to look at and ask a parent, what do you need here? And so that's a lot. It used to be, 3% of our population, and now it's 10% of our population. And that's a lot.
It's a huge number. And I think we're really fortunate as a district to have you, of course, but also our other nurses. And, a lot of districts don't have that resource.
They do not.
And so what do other districts do? I mean, I know there are other districts that don't have, they're not as fortunate to have this type of resource. What do they do when a child comes with a medical plan or something like that?
We, in the beginning, when I first started doing, being the nurse in Oakland County, if you will, I went to Oakland County and said, hey, do we have any other nurses in Oakland County? And at the time before COVID, we had 6 Oakland County nurses.
Wow.
And now we have I think there's about 60 or 70 of us, which Oakland County kind of took the initiative and got us all nurses for every building, which was very helpful. And then a lot of them just kept them because they're like, oh, wait, maybe we did need a nurse. And so I feel that we've had a lot. It's growing. We do have a good team, but there still are some schools that will reach out, principals all the time. I used to have a lot more principals call me and they'll say, hey, we heard you had a school nurse, can you give us some guidance? And I've had many a call from different cities, different counties to say, what should we do in these cases? And sometimes I say, well, I think you need a nurse, or somebody, a medical person that you can rely on and just consult with. So.
Yeah, I certainly see you as a critical and vital part of our team, and I know that we also had the opportunity to welcome Dennis Heisman, who's our supervisor of safety and security. And you are not an educator by trade. Dennis is not an educator by trade, but you bring a skill set that educators don't have. And I think as schools are looking to service our families and be able to meet the needs of our students, not one particular discipline can serve all of those needs, right?
Correct.
And that's why we have to be thinking differently about, sometimes schools need to be thinking about the people that will support, our students and our families in the operations, so that our highly trained educators, the people that are really good working with the kids, they understand, that they don't have to shoulder that burden.
Correct, right? So, when you can give them guidance about what to do with a sick kid or an injured kid or anybody in their classroom, it makes them feel better if they have somebody to reach out to and just talk that medical jargon with,
For sure. So, practical question. So we have a parent that would say, okay, I got an unfortunate diagnosis. My child has some sort of medical issue. This is going to be, whether it's temporary or long-term. What advice would you give a parent? What does a parent do that's searching for, okay, I went to the doctor. This is what I found out. What do I do now? Because my kid's supposed to go to school tomorrow.
I would definitely reach out immediately to the parent, because sometimes it's the principal that finds out first, right? I would meet with the parent and say, hey, what does your outlook look like about them going to school? And let's come up with a plan. And we would make a plan as early as 24 hours, get them back in school as quick as we can. It may look like being in a wheelchair for a while. It may look like have some injections every day at school. Whatever that may look like, we want our kids in school. And so we would work and create a medical plan. If we needed a 504, if we needed to get external staff involved, we would do it. We would do whatever we needed to get our kids in school. And I'm confident that we have done that.
It's an amazing testimony, and I appreciate not only what you've done for the students and the families in this community for over 13 years, but we're really fortunate to have you on the team. And this has been a really interesting episode, because I think it's a kind of a niche that a lot of people don't know about. And the average parent doesn't think about the medical staff that the school actually has.
Right.
And so with that, as we kind of wrap up, is there anything that you want to put out there, whether it's to families or staff, about the importance of your role, and or anything you'd like to kind of leave them with?
In the beginning, there were not a lot of people that knew we had a medical staff, and now a lot more people do. And I think people can depend on us. I want the community to know that we're here to help keep kids in school, get kids in school, and work with our staff to make everybody comfortable taking care of them. And that's really important to me. As a mom in this district, it's really important to me because my kids have had medical issues too.
Sure.
So as a mom, that's important, but also as a community member, and a staff member. It's really important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for all that you do. And it's been a blast. I love this episode. I hope that everybody got a lot out of it. Stay tuned for our next episode, which will be being released over the next few weeks. And stay tuned and stay healthy and have a great holiday season, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.